Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
Hello and welcome to the Yogananda podcast, where we're discussing the autobiography of a yogi, and we're on chapter 10, part 6. How's everyone doing?
Excellent.
Very good. Yeah.
Mike's got his Christmas jumper on. Christmas cardigan, sorry. Mike does love a good cardigan.
I like a good cardigan. That's right.
I'm in Brazil for the first Christmas ever, and it feels very strange being in 30-degree heat. And shorts and t-shirt.
I hear you, Chris. I went Christmas shopping yesterday at 25 degrees. It's different feeling, different vibes.
I should be in Ranchi for Christmas tomorrow, Christmas Eve meditation, which should be good. All right, let's start. So this is a very, very important episode. Potentially, you could say the most important episode we've done to date. This is Guruji's explanation and description of his first meeting in this life with his master, Gurudeva, Sri Yukteswar. And we will remember in the previous episode that Chris led, and he was buying some vegetables. He'd had enough of his life in Dayananda's ashram, and his legs were unable to carry him away from that face he had seen along that alleyway. And he had turned and he had walked then towards this man. And this is where we begin. But before we do that, because this is such an important episode, let's set some context. Okay, so firstly, the Guru is obviously the biggest theme in this podcast. So what does the word Guru and the concept of a Guru, conception of a Guru, mean to us in our spiritual path? That can mean many different things to a few different people, but for us, we're sticking to the traditional definition. And Guru, just to remind people, Guru is one who dispels darkness. Chris?
Yeah, I was probably going to say very much that, the one who dispels darkness. I know for me, looking back before I was initiated into the SRF and accepted Yogananda as my guru, it did seem like different between night and day, quite literally, in my mind, in my own consciousness, in terms of the clarity of mind. What was the purpose of life? Why are we here? What am I? All these kind of big questions seem to be shrouded in darkness. So that literal definition is the best definition for me, because it does shed light on the path of life, and focuses the mind on what's important in life. So yeah, very much the dispeller of darkness is a great definition, and one that I accept.
Mike?
Yeah, and when you're on the spiritual path, you need a guru. That is also something that you don't always, I guess every religion teaches this in their own way, that their prophet is their guru in that sense. It's someone who becomes very personal to you after a time. I think Brother Anandamoy said this thing that he went to India, and there he learned that God is Guru and Guru is God. So for him, Guru is his kind of personal, I don't want to say version, but the kind of where he projects his love to, and the love then gets relayed to God. So it's a most important thing on his spiritual path.
Supplementary reading to this episode is not reading, listening. Brother Anandamoy's talk on loyalty, the highest spiritual law. In that very powerful talk, he talks about a lot of the concepts we're going to talk about in this episode, and I'm going to cross-reference them. One of the things he says is that the Vedas say that a guru is required to, essentially, for us to have attain self-realization. So that is also the context we're referring to here when we're asking ourselves, what is a guru? Chris?
I read a little bit, just taking a few seconds, as to what Yogananda himself says about this, as to what a guru is. And he says it in a very eloquent way. He says, the speaking voice of the silent God guru is one who knows God and who shows the way to him. To follow a divine manifestation is the sure way to God realization. One who knows God becomes the speaking voice of the silent God. Attunement with the wisdom-guided will of a true guru teaches one how to guide his will according to God's will. Those who follow the voice of their own ego, ascribing it to a halo of divine guidance, find out too late that no amount of diluted rationalization will relieve one of the karmic responsibility of wrong actions. To be led by an ego-bound will is to stumble into painful, delusive entanglements. Do not remain entangled, be free. That's Yogananda's take on what you're saying there, Priyanka, about sort of following your ego versus following a guru.
Very nice. And yeah, Laura?
Yeah, I feel like it's the most beautiful relationship that we can experience on all planes, right? And to have that relationship with, well, we share the same guru, which is amazing in itself. But it's very deeply moving. And like you say, Chris, it's, for me, it's that reminder of, well, I can never be lost if I stick by my guru, right? Because how can you? It's a very special thing, isn't it?
Yogananda tells us to repair the microphone of our mind, to send and receive these messages to God and from God. And he says essentially the analogy is that the microphone's broken, the receiver may be broken as well. So the go-to might then be the guru, because the guru is very much talking to us, is very much speaking to us through all the text and all the lessons and everything that we have. And that is a direct line to God, is the guru, because sometimes we might pray to God, but we don't hear that response. We're not attuned enough. So very much, whenever I heard Yogananda say that, I thought, wow, it's such a blessing really to have this kind of step down for us, on this plane till we, can rise up to the point where we're united with God.
You three are way ahead of the game here, because my next point to raise was why bother to look for this concept of a guru. But I think you guys have you answered that question really plumb. But I remember when in my own search, whilst reading the Autobiography of a Yogi, I was really obsessive about this search, or the concept, the spiritually romantic concept of searching for a guru and finding your spiritual path. It was more like fascination with that whole meaning of life versus like a deep spiritual calling. That for me came a bit later, which is interesting. Chris?
Yeah, it's a funny point actually, Frank, because growing up in Ireland, I'd never heard mention of the word guru. Growing up in the UK, in circles I was in, at very least, it wasn't a talking point. I spent my entire life not thinking about it once. Jesus was the closest thing to a guru that I was aware of without knowing it. Really, and obviously Buddha and the rest. But it wasn't really until I read the Autobiography of a Yogi, and particularly this chapter, that I started to actually see really this path, that there was a path toward answers and so on and so forth, that the penny dropped for me. So this chapter was really one that struck home in a very real and raw way, and for the first time really for me. So it was a very significant first time read.
Very true for most of us, I think. Most of us in the world, unless you're specifically from India, or that Indian more kind of Buddhist kind of background. So you've got this idea of a guru, shall we say, but how do you know that this is your guru? How do you know that this is your spiritual path that you're meant to follow? People often, newcomers to the path in the center, often raise this conversation in lots of different ways, and I always tell them, like, keep working on the lessons, keep coming to the center, working on your meditation, develop your devotion, all the basics, but only take Kriya when you know that Yogananda is your guru, and that knowing will come. That came for me as well as I was doing the lessons, and that's one of the only reasons I took Kriya, went to the next phase. But how do you guys remember the point where you knew, yeah, this is it? I think for some people it comes very quickly and early, but others have to churn like I did, churn a lot, which is interesting. Chris?
I recall, actually, I was probably one of those students at some point. I was speaking to a very beloved member of the SRF family in London, in the London Centre, who's passed now, but speaking to her one day, and I asked her, how do I know? When do I know? And she said essentially that, but she said it in a very much more direct way. And I kind of came away from the conversation thinking, like, I know it intuitively, but I wanted to know it sort of rationally in some way. And the two, it was an important lesson to start to really build on that intuition and the messages that I was receiving, but maybe blocking out because I couldn't rationalize it. It wasn't logical in some sense. And so, yeah, I do remember the day when I sort of asked the question and came out of the conversation surrendering to the idea that I might have been resistant to before, that I sort of wanted and needed a guru. So it was a very sort of pivotal moment that I had there, where sort of penny dropped, crystallized, and I jumped in with both feet.
Very nice, Chris. Very nice. I know exactly the direct approach person you're talking about. Mm-hmm. She's very elegant in her way that she does it as well, or did it, isn't she? So hopefully that's set some good context, and it'll give you a flavor or an idea of our mindset as to why we consider this episode so important, and why we're going to pull out the elements that we're going to pull out. So let's start with the first word, which is Gurudeva, ! So you can imagine this is young Mukunda speaking directly to Sri Yukteswar, and this time he did not use the word master. He did not use any other description such as saint or swami. He used Gurudeva. And Mike, can you remind us, as it was described in the previous chapter, what Gurudeva translates as?
Divine teacher, the customary Sanskrit term for one spiritual preceptor. Deva, God, combined with Guru, illumined teacher, indicates profound reverence and respect. I have rendered it in English as simply master. Halcyon memories of distant...
No,
not yet.
okay. Not that, no.
Okay.
That's a bit later. But yeah, so Gurudeva. So very beautiful first word to say to someone that you recognize as your guru. And the next line is, the divine face was one I had seen in 1,000 visions. Very powerful words, 1,000 visions. But we know Mukund from Mukunda's early life, and especially in the book Medita, how much or how many visions he had, and how hard he was seeking this experience that we're we're going through now, Mike?
That's the first time he really mentions that he had so many visions of. He talked about masters that he saw in the Himalayas, but I felt if he knew so well what his guru would look like, then my question that I had a few episodes ago is like, how did he ever think Dayananda would be the right ashram for him if he didn't have those kind of experiences? But it's interesting that he could have recounted the story the other way around, where he says, I had all of those visions and I went looking, but he never really went for that. He once he saw Sri Yukteswar, he knew he was the right guy, but not the other way around. Maybe when he had those visions, he wasn't sure if his guru would look exactly like in the visions, or that like the way life is. Maybe sometimes maybe he would have seen his guru, but from a different incarnation or something like that. But it's interesting that now that he sees him, he knows 100% he's my guru without even talking to him.
I also feel like when you're first on that kind of search, even though you know something isn't right, so he probably knew deep down that Dayanandaji wasn't his guru, but it's so desperate to kind of get out of the situation that he was in and go on his spiritual quest that, you know, you become willing to put yourself in situations that you know aren't particularly the exact right thing. But all in all, it led him to where he needed to be, right? Which is right at his guru's feet. So in the end, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, the words that he used was in chapter 10, part 2. He said that he decided to join a Benares hermitage to receive its spiritual discipline. So it wasn't really to say, and I think he would have probably said, which was to seek out a guru, to be initiated or so on and so forth. But it was quite renowned, I think, at the time from the research that we've done, to be quite a disciplinarian type school of sorts. You know, it was something that I think attracted a lot of people, where, you know, they wanted to have that type of education on spiritualism and Hinduism, so on and so forth. So I'm not sure he was actually going there to seek out a guru. I think he probably would have said that otherwise. Certainly he's found his guru now.
Yeah, I agree, Chris. Yeah, I think with Dayananda, that was just probably, he knew it was just a stepping stone. And as Lauren said, he needed to get out of the cusp of family restrictions.
How ironic. Yeah.
Why?
Because his path might lead back there at some point.
Oh, right. Getting ahead of the game. Going to your episode next, I think. But it must have been quite a thing to have had thousands of visions of this one face, isn't it? Quite a powerful concept. One that I can't possibly imagine. Mike, can you?
The statistics guy in me just came up and was like, how many visions per day do you need to have in a life of a 20-year-old? And it's actually not that many. If you have a vision every other day, I guess you had visions very frequently in his meditations that you had every day. So I think thousands must be accurate that way.
Yeah, but we do, because a vision is different from an imagining, isn't it? An imagining would be something that's a self-constructed thing, whereas a vision is something that tangibly comes into your perception, your inner eye. So he's having quite good spiritual experiences by having visions of a face, and obviously the first line of the autobiography of a yogi was that, the characteristic features of the Indian culture have long been the search for the ultimate verities and the concomitant disciple-guru relationship. So he's from his own, he started the autobiography essentially with describing this search, and here this line now kind of completes itself, doesn't it? Because this is now he's found his guru, because he's recognized him from all his visions. And he describes in the next line describes his features, and he describes his features in two different sections of this page. Firstly, he says here, his halcyon eyes. Mike, what does halcyon mean? You were reading it way before.
English is a second language. I had to look this up immediately. I came across different definitions of this. So the thing I settled on was like an adjective that means calm. But I came across, so in Greek mythology, halcyon is apparently the kingfisher bird. And then there were also other definitions that were less of, but he used it as an adjective, so I went with calm.
Yeah, and I put together a couple of definitions, and I think you started reading it out earlier. Memories of a distant and happy, peaceful past. And if we obviously read a couple of lines down, we know that this is obviously a long-established relationship, so that would make sense in what he sees in those eyes. And then it describes the leonine head with a pointed beard and flowing locks. And now he describes how the visions had actually occurred next. But Mike, before we go there, do you want to say something?
Guruji tells us to look for friends from past lives, because we already made the effort to be friends with them in past lives, and that's why we will have an easier time to have friendships in this one. And I think this is also the ultimate friend that he found here from a past life. So this must also, not just in the sense that I found my guru, but also I found a dear friend from a past time. And there must have been a lot of love also that he felt for him.
Indeed. He also, Brother Anandamoy also says in this talk about loyalty, he mentions this. He says when we meet someone and we get along really well with them, whatever the nature of the relationship is, whether it's friendship or pure friendship or life partner, if it is a really wonderful relationship, it's one that we've worked on together in past lives, and that's a normal and ordinary human relationship. But one with a guru disciple, if that's how long it takes for us to establish a friendship with a mundane relationship, you could describe it, compared to the guru, imagine how many lifetimes, how many multiple more lifetimes worked on that relationship, which is another thing that's beautifully expressed in the Brother Anandamoy's talk. Chris?
I think I've said this before on the podcast, but I'll say it again. Coincidentally, that lesson that we're talking about in the old lessons was the lesson that I was reading when I first met my wife. And I was like, look, this is how I feel about you. I was all excited about it. So it came into my life at the right time, but encapsulated just what you're saying, Priyank. How we sort of hit it off with people in the first time and gel very well. I think it's definitely something that makes me appreciate the value in building positive relationships with people in this life, because you never know. You've got to work on it, not just in this life. It's going to come back and come back and come back. So it gives a very healthy, mature attitude, I think, when you're looking at your relationships.
I think one thought that can make your love for Guru more alive is, imagine the same thing would happen to you in a future life. You walk down an alley, and then you see the future incarnation of Paramahansa Yogananda in front of you, and then you can see how this life where he wasn't incarnated at the same time as you has brought you even closer together, even though you didn't see him physically.
It's already happened, Mike, right now in the multiverse version of yourself.
The multiverse, yes.
And Sri Yukteswar. How was that, Mike? Was that a good experience?
I don't like to. For me, there's no multiverse. It's too complicated in my head. So.
Okay, let's pick the multiverse where you do get it, and you can describe it beautifully. Go.
Yeah, there's only in a multiverse. There's only one.
Okay,
that I like.
Enough geek talk. All right. So he's described his facial, his features here, and he does only half of it really, because he's going to talk about the rest of his appearance later. But now he describes what he'd seen in these visions. That he'd said had oft peered through the gloom of my nocturnal reveries, holding a promise I had not fully understood. Mysterious. Holding a promise that I had not fully understood. So clearly these visions aren't just spiritual experiences. They have a very profound meaning and a promise that he's saying he had not. So potentially now he does understand. What do you take from it, Mike?
Possibly he saw him and he didn't know he was going to be his guru. Possibly he saw him as another person, and he probably had visions of many different people, and he maybe also didn't know that he would be his guru in this lifetime. So maybe in that way it makes sense why he didn't just say, I only accept this person as a guru because I saw him in my visions, because maybe it wasn't like that.
What popped into my mind was, do love a bit of speculation on these things, is Yogananda went on to be a guru himself and has a very large following and brought yoga to the West, essentially, right? Established it in a great way. And we know God chooses gurus, and it's a great privilege, and the individual has to be willing to essentially sacrifice themselves in some way to kind of reincarnate and serve others and be of service to others. So that's a great promise that maybe Yogananda's soul made to God, and that's this great thing that's going to unfold for Yogananda. And so that service is something that I thought maybe Yogananda at this time, as Mukunda didn't quite understand all the responsibilities and developments that he was going to undertake himself. And maybe Sri Yukteswar saw all that very clearly, being an avatar of sorts, self.
The promise that I had interpreted was the guru's promise to the disciple, as long as the disciple stays, loyal, is to deliver essentially promises. Mukunda and Sri Yukteswar later in this chapter essentially make each other promise to each other that they'll, reveal God. And this is, I think, the promise that he could potentially be talking about, but it is very mysterious, I must say, and it's very spiritually romantic, beautiful language, isn't it? It touches a nerve, but we can't really grasp it. But in the film Awake, The Life of Yogananda, there was a similar experience, I thought, and related. Professor or Dr. Clooney, who we had on this podcast from Harvard University, said it quite well. Lauren, do you want to repeat it?
He said, "We're conflicted beings as humans. One of the deepest things about us is that our lives don't make sense, except in the mystery. Yogananda provided us a vocabulary to talk about the human spirit that got away from dogma and doctrine and ritual. Whether it be a Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, whatever tradition you're part of, Yogananda charted a path inward that connected you with your own divinity."
There you have it. So Yogananda did that for us, and clearly Sri Yukteswar was going to do it, or had done it from him in a previous incarnation, and is going to do it, as we know, in this incarnation. So that could be it, potentially. So the next section is really about Sri Yukteswar, and I don't think you could get a better first line from a guru, a more evocative, a more beautiful, heart-pulling narrative. The first words he says, "Oh, my own, you have come to me." Oh, my own. So, "Oh, my own" is just 3 words, but very, very powerful words, and quite powerful for, I think, SRF devotees, because Guruji uses these lines very often to, invoke in us the devotion to call God our own, because, we are his own. And Brother Anandamoy talks about this very, very beautifully in that loyalty talk. So I really recommend you listen to that. But he ends that talk with, "You are his own and he is your own." And that, once you've realized those 2 beautiful things, those doors and windows open up. And he also said, Sister Gyanamata, one of Guruji's most advanced disciples, was doing some work for Master, and doing it, very, very dedicatingly. And she said, his work is my work. That's the level of devotion with which she was serving her Guru. It's not his work, it's my work, it's our work. His will is my will. Thy will be done, not mine. It's all very, very, very beautifully encapsulated in my own. And I also found a very beautiful section in the second coming of Christ that Jesus Christ also alludes to, and it's described in this section as Jesus' intercessionary prayer for his disciples, that they may be one with God, and it's in Discourse 72. Mike, can you start us with that reading, please?
I am praying for the redemption of those whom thou sent to me for guidance and deliverance to thy kingdom, for they belong to thee, owing to their awareness of thee. All devotees who belong to me belong to thee, and all who are thine I also embrace as my own. My Christ consciousness is glorified in the glory of thy power, manifested in these thy true devotees.
Jesus humilely feels the responsibility for the attainment of his disciples during his absence. He knew that after his departure, Satan would seize on any karmic weaknesses within them and use it to try to destroy their spiritual lives. So Jesus makes the fervent plea to the Father, "Thou givest the disciples to me. They belong to thee and me, and that is why thou must protect them from the influence of evil during my absence. For I want successfully to carry out thy wishes in helping them to save themselves by finishing their earthly karma."
Jesus asked the Father to keep the disciples in his holy presence through thine own name, through the cosmic vibration emanating from God, which is heard by the devotees in meditation, that they may be one as we are, in attunement and oneness with the intrinsic unity of Christ consciousness and cosmic consciousness. In the manner of a true Guru Savior, Jesus prays that all his disciples enjoy the same divine communion that he has. Priyank, you are on mute.
I think this also expresses what the promise that he could have been referring to, that he did not fully understand. Jesus elaborates beautifully on this concept here of his own, and God's own being one. And so Sri Yukteswar says, "Oh my own, you have come to me." My Guru uttered the words again and again, and in Bengali. His voice was tremulous with joy, and this reveals what I'd like. I can't. I dare not use the word emotional, because emotional feels too human. This kind of transcends, gross emotions into the more subtle realms of, soul and soul joy. Mike, what do you think?
Seems that Sri Yukteswar also has more context than Mukunda has at this point of past lives, I think, because he seems very, very sure of everything, whereas Mukunda is experiencing this in the sense of that he's discovering things, and he's discovering that Sri Yukteswar is going to be his guru. Remember in the beginning of the book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, he told the story of Elijah and Eliseus, how they were, one was the guru and the other one was the disciple, and then in the next incarnation they switched roles. And so maybe Sri Yukteswar looks at Mukunda, maybe he was his guru in his past incarnation or something like that. So I can see so for Sri Yukteswar this all seems very, very open, and he knows exactly who Mukunda is and that how much he means to him.
I agree with you, Priyanka, about maybe the shallowness of the words of feeling emotional when you read it, because that is actually initially how I felt, that emotion. But I imagine for Yogananda, it made him be satisfied. So it wasn't so much the feeling, he became satisfied at the reunification of this great soul in his life. And that's probably a derivative of the satisfying feeling of samadhi, of unification with God, in a sense. That coming together of these great souls must be so satisfying. And he spent a whole lifetime feeling that urge and that desire and that will within him to go out and seek this guru that he's now finally with.
Something that really struck me just now when you were talking about it is the joy of a guru when his disciple comes. And I think it's perhaps something, well, I know I haven't reflected on that much, but it's right here, isn't it? In the autobiography. And we get it later on as well with Babaji and Ahiri Mahasaya. They wait so long for us to come back. And actually, that's a joyous reunion for them as much as it is for us, and perhaps even more deeply so, because they understand more deeply what that is than we do. So it's actually a big wow moment, isn't it? Really, reading this, we can interrelate it in our own relationship with our guru.
Indeed. But for people that aren't seeing this from a position of experience of establishing a relationship with a guru, it's still very much relatable, because I remember when my grandmother would see me after a few years. I'd moved from India to the United Kingdom, and I'd go back after a few years, and she'd be so emotional, and she'd say my son, and she'd stroke my hair and pull it all the way back. I still remember it. And she'd have tears in her eyes at the reunion. So I think we all have experiences of family and friends being overjoyed at a reunion. So we can relate, everyone can relate to this moment, whether it's on the simple level of family and friends, or the most deepest level, i.e. two souls being reacquainted in this life, which is quite powerful. And as Lawrence says, God is essentially waiting for us, right, to turn turn back towards him, and he suffers when we suffer, but he doesn't intervene because it's free will, right? We've got to be our choice to turn to him. And similarly, the Guru, he's always ready to come into your life, but you have to be that one that turns in his direction, shunning all the lesser things that you may have prioritized your whole life up to this moment, which is quite a beautiful thought. The next sentence he says is, "How many years I've waited for you," which further emphasizes, his wait, because he's, as Mike said, he's seen this film. He knows how it ends, but he didn't know how long it would take for this reunion in this life to come. And in Brother Anandamoy's talk, he mentions one of the disciples. This was like 4 days before Paramahansa Yogananda took his Mahasamadhi. He said one of the disciples came to see him, and after pledging his life to Guruji, and this was his first time that he'd actually physically met Master, and Master, he was waiting to go somewhere, but he stopped and he took his hat off, and then they had this very, very, very beautiful moment. And all he said, and Brother Anandamoy was listening in on this conversation, he took his hat off, and all he said was, "Loyalty is the highest spiritual law." And this disciple came to him, he only knew Master in this incarnation for 4 days. So he came to him just 4 days before his departure. So, this Sri Yukteswar doesn't know how long he's going to have to wait, but he's going to come. But, time is immaterial in matters of the soul. Like 1 second can be infinity, or 10 years can be 1 second. But yeah, Mike.
Yeah, and it's been quite a few years in Sri Yukteswar's incarnation before he actually met Yogananda. He was born in 1855, so he must have been, I would guess, 57, 58 years old at this point. So, and I don't know if you would call this the highlight of his incarnation, but maybe one of them.
Yeah,
that came quite late. Yeah,
Guruji describes the maths a bit later. 55 is the approximation, but we'll get to that a bit later. And then he says, "We entered a oneness of silence. Words seemed the rankest superfluities." So they entered some silence, and we've talked about interiority moments, and I count this as the 9th, probably the most important one to date. So I'm making a list. Seems to be an average one a chapter. Mike?
So this sets them apart from everything else I know from life, because they meet each other like as long lost friends, kind of, and show all this love. And then they say a few words, and then they suddenly both sit down and meditate. So this is, I guess if there would have been a third person present, they would have thought, what's going on here? But he says it very beautifully. He said, "We entered a oneness of silence." So they must have both communed in meditation with each other.
An external observer may think, "Oh, they must not like speaking to each other much." In social settings, if there's silence, then they're not really getting along very well, are you? Have much to say to each other.
They ran out of things to say quickly.
Yeah, so they'll soon depart each other's company. But no, how deluded. But the next line further exemplifies this. So he says, "Eloquence flowed in soundless chant from the heart of master to disciple." And it also says, the previous line is, "Words seemed the rankest superfluities," which does that, Chris, does that render podcasting about this stuff and adding more words to it? Does that render it useless?
It did just remind me about the unspoken word, and how one must be careful to actually be mindful of the thoughts and your feelings, because that actually is transmuted in a sense. Because that's what I'm getting from this, is that there was a genuine conversation, let's say, happening between the two that didn't take form of words. So, it's pretty good, a good reminder. Don't harbor something different in your heart that you wouldn't want to be spoken in words.
Very well put. Very well put. Yeah, we can only conjecture at what the actual conversation was, but Guruji gives us a hint in the next line, because he hints at what Sri Yukteswar's purpose is, I suppose, in his life, and what any guru's purpose is in a disciple's life. And he says, with an antenna of irrefragable insight, I sensed that my guru knew God and would lead me to him. So this antenna sounds very much like a very live intuition feeling. And this is potentially something that they were communicating, but without words at this point, when they were in that interiority and silence moment. Again, we don't know. We can only assume. We can only theorize. It is here in the next line, so it wouldn't be unfounded. The obscurations of life, he goes on to say, disappear in a fragile dawn of prenatal memories. Now, this I read to mean that he's been searching for a guru, and he's done lots of things that he may, or we've done lots of things that we may not be too happy with. But essentially, a lifetime of delusion or frustrations is like vanished here. That's why I read, the obscurations of this life disappeared in a fragile dawn of prenatal memories. And it's almost like when a man, if you're drowning and you don't know if you're going to find air, but then you find air, and then you're like, oh, that breath, but then you forget all that struggle and strife that was happening under the water shortly after you're ashore. But yeah, Mike, what do you think?
I read it a bit differently. I thought this would be a similar moment to when Lahiri Mahashai comes to Babaji and suddenly remembers his past lives in the caves with Babaji. And I thought this was the moment where past life memories, or maybe memories in the astral plane of him and Sri Yukteswar being together, suddenly came to him, and this obscuration kind of disappeared of those memories were hidden. That's what I thought.
Could be, but when he has his moment of cosmic consciousness and experiencing cosmic consciousness, he describes what you're saying, i.e., all memories of past incarnations come to him. So again, this could be a prelude to that. But certainly, I think we can all agree that the obscurations of his present life are now, behind him, because he's now with his guru. The purpose of his life has been fulfilled up to this point. And then he says, dramatic time, past, present, and future, in its cycling scenes. So some hints of yoga's discussions there, but we won't go into that. And this next section is really beautiful. He says, this was not the first son to find me at these holy feet. This was not the first son to find me at these holy feet. And that is quite a stunning way to suggest that the relationship was one that was had in many, many previous lifetimes. And if you clearly see the order that he said in this one, he said, this was not the first son to find me at these holy feet. So he kind of very clearly suggests that Sri Yukteswar, in those incarnations that he's referring to, he was the disciple and Sri Yukteswar was the guru. And there's I think we all take for granted, but we know that every time we say the prayer, we know the lineage and the order. But there's always some people that there's rumors out there that Sri Yukteswar was like a surrogate guru, and Yogananda's actual guru was Mahavtar Babaji. But here, I think it kind of dispels that rumor in this line, and that theory wouldn't necessarily have credence from what we're reading here. But it's very beautifully put, isn't it? Very romantic, spiritual language. So the next section is really about Sri Yukteswar's physical appearance, and I'm glad Yogananda has gone through these in a bit of detail, because if we look at the pictures of Sri Yukteswar that we do have, they're not very good, are they? Like even the picture we have on the altar, if you compare it, you look at it quite closely, compare it to the other gurus, that's the blurriest one. Sri Yukteswar's face is for some reason blurry, so we don't have a very crisp picture of Sri Yukteswar. But here Guruji has done us a service of describing him in really quite a lot of detail. But first he says, my hand in his. He says, my guru led me to his temporary residence in the Rana Mahal section of the city. Now I was very near this section of the city just today, actually, as fortune would have it. Mike?
In another section, he calls it the Bengali part of the city, and that I found that interesting because Bengal is a different language than I guess Hindi is what they speak in the other part, and so you basically have a multicultural city there, right? And I guess people who speak the same language gather in the same area, but it's interesting that India has so much cultural diversity.
Mm-hmm. It does indeed. So now he describes his physical. Well, actually, first you'll remember that he says, "My hand in his," which is quite a nice moment, isn't it? Imagining that moment, and I think you'll recall that I said that this is not uncommon amongst two members of the same sex in India. And it's not a romantic indication. It's one of friendship and love that transcends sex, as it were. So I'll talk about that a bit later, and about this as Rana Mahal section of the city a bit later as well, after I spend a bit more time there. So he describes now the physical appearance. Firstly, he says his athletic figure moved with firm tread. Now, this would have been particularly attractive to Mukunda because, as we know from Mejda, Mukunda was very, very much into physical exercises and sports and wrestling and all these kind of things. So seeing a guru that wasn't meek, essentially, he was very, very athletic, so he would have been attracted to that, and it kind of fit the bill of what he would kind of want from a guru, so that's quite nice. So then he describes him as tall, erect, and he says about Mike 55 at the time. So I did some maths just as you did, Mike, and if he was 55 and Mukunda was either 17 or 18, depending on which month of the year they met. Of course, we do not know that information, but it does check out because we know he left school. So my bet was that he was 18. So yes, so it does check out. So now he describes him as an active and vigorous as a young man. Now this is an important lesson, I think. active and vigorous as a young man. I went to my one of my distant uncles had a 90th birthday, yeah, just a couple of weeks ago, and he is like, he doesn't look 90 basically. He's like completely physically fit, and exactly as Sri Yukteswar is being described here. He's got a firm step, he's got very erect posture, and he like gets involved. Like I was on my way to work once, and he was there. He was going into a house that he was repairing or something, and he asked me for help. So then I went to help him, and we were lifting cement bags and stuff together. And he was like 90, and I was like, I can't believe that he's doing all this stuff. But because he is so active, I guess he is, he's retained his youth because of his very physical and active life. So that's some clues for us as to how to retain everlasting youth. And it's not done by, there's no mention of here going into labs and injecting yourself with all sorts of crazy hormones or anything. Lauren?
Something I've often noticed is that yogis generally look very young and youthful. You only have to look around the London Centre and just think, oh, wow, everyone looks really young, and then suddenly they reveal how old they are and go, oh, wow, so there's definitely something to that, isn't there?
Definitely. And he describes the important section. He says his eyes were large, beautiful with plumbless wisdom. Plumbless here means a very deep body of water. So you can imagine what it would have been like to look into Sri Yukteswar's eyes. Then it says, slightly curly hair softened a face of striking power. And I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say that we're very glad that his hair softens the striking power, because he's quite a spectacle to look at, isn't it? It's a jarring energy, isn't it, for you? And I think everyone else kind of doesn't want, you don't ever want to be told off by Sri Yukteswar, do you? You wouldn't mind getting you wouldn't mind getting told off by Paramahansa Yogananda. You wouldn't mind getting told off by Lahiri Mahashaya, but Sri Yukteswar, if he told you off, I'm sure you could feel it, Mike.
Yeah, but at the same time, he has this kind of part to him that is very loving, in a way that is like what we said earlier. Like, he doesn't express the love, but you just feel it from him. Like, I have Sri Yukteswar pictures in my apartment and in places, because I find them very positive. When I wake up in the morning and I look at Sri Yukteswar's picture, I feel, I don't know, I feel very, it's a very positive appearance in my life, Sri Yukteswar. So I know, like, sometimes when I feel like, oh, I did something wrong, and I look at this picture, maybe maybe that's but in general, I think that there's a lot of love emanating from his persona.
And for being known as such a disciplinarian, and being quite a challenge for even those seekers who wanted a yogic path to follow. He didn't have many disciples. We know he only had a handful of disciples, really, that could stick at it through his harsh disciplinary kind of style. But yet we see here, he says, "Oh, my own, you've come to me. How many years have I waited for you?" It's so gentle, soft, loving. The two almost don't match, but that's the polarity of the reality of his love. And Yogananda, in a later chapter we'll read, but he's sort of begging for Sri Yukteswar to actually just tell him that he loves him, because he doesn't actually use the words as much.
We'll talk about this in the next episode.
Yeah. It's the next episode. It's the next episode. Oh, sorry.
No.
I thought it was much later, but So yeah, like we know he's a man of few words, right? But yeah, here he is. This outpouring of love is pretty moving.
Yeah, the next line sums it up quite well. Strength mingled subtly with gentleness. Very, very nicely put. But about this, I remember, I think I was listening to a talk by Mrinalini Mata, and she was saying that once Guruji was really, really telling off Dayamata, like really telling her off, like at the most minorest of things. And then later someone approached Guruji saying, that was really, really harsh. And Guruji essentially said that Dayamata is not one to like be, she can take it essentially. She's accepted my training in all its forms and discipline, in whichever form that I know is needed at the time is she's, and that's what differentiates Dayamata from the others, I suppose. Chris?
No, I was inspired by Mike many episodes ago where he said the little book, Mike, that you carry around with you everywhere. Is it, I forget the name. Here's the light. There is light. That's the very book there. Where there's light. Yeah, and I almost use that as my, direct line to Guruji. Sometimes when I'm walking out the door, I want to pick up the book, open it at a random point, and sometimes it's firm and fair and stern and a bit more disciplinary, and then other times it's this loving, kind, sort of approach. And I just use that as his direct speech to me, and it's so funny how often it is relevant to exactly what it is that I need at that time. But yeah, I had one today that just sort of got me back in line with a couple of things that I was thinking about, and I just thought that this is a nice way for Guruji to help discipline us in this life.
Indeed, I need to read that book. But that we'll end it there, I think, unless anyone's got any more to add. Mike is going to take us forward into the next very important sections. Again, more moving sections of this beautiful episode of the reunion between these two souls. So thank you again, everyone, and the three of you for joining us. And we shall see you next time. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.